Welcome to Scotland. Chapter 9 Holiday. The Lennoxes go on holiday to Scotland, where they encounter infidelity in the form of Bunty and Mr. Roper's relationship, as well as Ruby's trauma on a boat. Patricia becomes pregnant and leaves home, leaving Rags the dog in Ruby's care. Characterization, mate. Ruby makes fun of George about his ignorance over his wife's infidelity. She says, a more alert man would have realised instantly he was being cuckolded. However, he shows his harsher side when he calls her a whore, despite his own infidelities throughout their marriage. He is a hypocrite. Unlike Bunty, who, I suppose, is kind of also a hypocrite, but she's doing this as revenge against George. So, I wonder who's worse. Sarcasm. That was obviously George. Bunty becomes enamoured with infidelity here, Ruby saying, I don't think it's very wise of our mother to defend her lover in public in this way, when Bunty attempts to defend Clive for Rose's navigating skills. Ruby describes their romance as if Mr. Roper was a magnet and Bunty a heap of iron filings, which shows once again Ruby's views on Bunty being a helpless woman, and the fact she's a bit misogynistic towards her mother, despite also being a female character. Bunty is blinded by love. However, while she is locked in the caresses of infidelity, Bunty is just as anxious and irritable as ever. Woe betide any vehicle that gets in between us and the Ropers, for it faces instant disintegration from Bunty's brainwaves. Ruby is her same sardonic self in this chapter, saying, Is there any way I could accelerate my evolution and develop earlids? She experiences, however, a moment of pure elation, like an unexpected gift, and the hole inside me, where something has been taken away, heals over and is filled. This is clearly her trauma over the death of her twin sister, and while she doesn't know it, seeing the lock may have somehow triggered something inside her, although later on it becomes much more negative and traumatic. Patricia sinks further into teenage dreariness, saying things like Hitler took care of the Jews, when Bunty says that their dog's Rag is taken care of. She ends the chapter pregnant. Ruby says that they are served porridge, much to Patricia's dismay, showing that despite their increase in age, Patricia still does not like porridge as she did when she was 5 in the first chapter. When there's mention of a massacre, Patricia is not thinking about Campbell's and McDonald's, but Roper's and Lennox's, or perhaps just Lennox's. Literary techniques, man. At the beginning of the chapter, Ruby says, We're off! Not to see the wizard, but on holiday. This is a reference to the Wizard of Oz, one of the many throughout the novel, and it is ironic as their trip is not glamorous or exciting, like in the film, but just mundane and depressing. Ruby later describes the journey as following the yellow brick road, or rather, a dubious single track. Ruby is once again living in her self-constructed world of fantasy, and she says they are moving as if we're harpooned onto Moby Dick, rather than a 1963 console classic, a reference to Herman Melville's novel in the 19th century. Patricia's reading Tristram Shandy, linking back to Atkinson's use of this as inspiration for the novel's opening, in which Ruby begins the story before she's born, as Tristram Shandy did. The Hammer Holiday from Hell is about to begin. Ruby calls Mr. Roper the Reverend Clive Green, and Bunty, Miss Bunty Scarlet, a reference to the board game Cluedo. She's clearly talking about George's Cluedo-like discovery of their infidelity. Ruby calls Scotland perhaps the most foreign location of all, but it will later in the novel become her home. The civil rights movement is mentioned here, and Patricia talks a lot about things like injustice and racial prejudice. However, there is a German exchange student at their school who, ironically, she's always cornering her and asking her if she feels discriminated against. Ruby says the civil rights movement is, in America that is, we don't really have coloured people here, where she sounds racist. However, she says, naturally, Patricia has my complete support in her campaign against injustice, perhaps showing more liberal views than is typical for her time, at least in the UK. Atkinson frequently uses the parentheses in this chapter to illustrate various lines of dialogue in Ruby's narration, such as, "Just run over the bloody thing," when the family has to run an impressive sheep gauntlet, zigzagging for nearly a mile behind one particularly insouciant beast. Ruby says that there is a smile of the Buddha playing on her features when Patricia quotes Jack Kerouac's On the Road, which foreshadows her transformation into a Buddhist later in life. The chapter also contains an incident when Ruby begins to scream, a fearful scream that rises up from the bottomless lock inside me, and she says, "The water!" Ruby says that Bunty and George have decided to remain married and behave as if nothing has happened, something they were very, very good at. This time reference to their 1950s style stiff upper lip about Pearl. I'm on a lonely road and I'm travelling. Ruby discovers in this chapter that she's of Scottish descent, despite the fact that George and Bunty never stop going on about how they're Yorkshire born and bred. She wants to escape from the curse of her Yorkshire family, a desire which leads her to move to Scotland in the penultimate chapter. Is identity dominated by place, or is it dominated by personality, family, your ties? Despite cheating on his wife throughout his life, George shouts "whore" when he finds Bunty with Mr. Roper. These gender boundaries and double standards extend to Ruby, who shews no judgment of George with Doreen and all his frequent other people. But she mocks Bunty with Mr. Roper, saying, when they are out for lunch, she is, after all, about to have lunch in a hotel with her lover, which is quite a romantic thing to do, even with the drawback of 2 spouses and 5 children. When Ruby sees all the water of the boat trip and has a breakdown, she's clearly remembering the Pearl incident. But when Patricia says, "I know, Ruby," destiny gets in the way because the wind carries away the rest of her words. It seems as if, when she's finally close to discovering the truth, it was wrenched away from her deliberately by nature itself. Somewhere just beyond the mist, there's our real Scottish holiday, and perhaps all the other holidays we never had as well. The chapter is full of lost opportunities. Bunty loses the opportunity to start a new life with Mr. Roper. Patricia gives her baby away, and the family have long ago lost the opportunity to be a happy one.